If they say that rap is the new rock, we have the MCs and turntablists of social media here. And rather than me sort of hype them, I think it would be best if we have each of the individual ladies and gentlemen, not men, but man, describe themselves in what I like to call the I'm stuck in an elevator, when do I get off pitch? So why don't we start with Mari?
Sure. Hi, my name is Mari Takahashi. I am a co-founder of the YouTube channel Smosh Games, which is a sister channel to the comedy brand Smosh, which has been on YouTube since 2005. We launched our gaming channel in 2012, and we've been going strong since.
Mari, you obviously like to stay at the high-rise hotels. That was a long one. Next, Roxy.
Hi. Hello everyone, my name is Roxy Sun. I work for a indie label that's based out in San Francisco, and now we're going global. And we represent artists such as Tyga, Snoop Dogg, and Iggy Azalea, just to name a few. I'm the Asian territory manager. I work really closely with a couple of my colleagues, Rani, who's based in Indonesia, Jakarta, and Alex Branson, who's based in UK. Hi, shout out to Alex. We're kind of responsible for most of the operations that we do in Asia, and also because I'm conveniently located in Amsterdam, so I also help out with the DSP marketing and sales sort of things out there in those regions too.
Awesome. Full disclosure, for any of you who watch the Fox TV show Empire, the real label is actually a lot cooler. So, Parker, you're up next.
I don't know, I'm going to follow that. Thank you guys for sticking around to the last panel, last day. Appreciate that. We decided to crack open a beer to celebrate. So my name is Parker Jones. I am Vice President of Fullscreen. We are a social video and talent management company. We represent about 3,000 talent, which is about 5% of YouTube, mainly US creators. We manage about 400 brands. We manage their YouTube channels. We're a Warner Media company. My job is to expand the company internationally. So today that means joint venture in Japan. But tomorrow we're hoping to launch in Singapore.
Is that an announcement?
No, actually, I mean, we're hoping, which means we'd like to be out in APAC. I think it's one of the most interesting regions right now.
That's almost mic drop worthy material, but hold on to it for a little bit. And then last but not least, we have Emily Foster, who easily has probably the heaviest job title of all of us, Global Media Lead.
Yeah.
What is that?
I basically work for Wavemaker, which is a media agency, and essentially my job is to manage the Huawei account globally. So working with them in 65 markets and basically delivering this stuff for them all around the world. So it is pretty tough, yes. A challenge.
Always the opportunity. Now, because we have the word future in this title, I'm a big believer that before we take, obviously all of these individuals are all about doing the 2 steps forward, but what we want to do, is I want to do actually, is take 1 step back. Before you guys sort of had your current jobs and professions and passions be the current, what got you here? What was that 1 step back that forced you to take the 2 steps forward? We're going to mix it up a bit because I've been giving Parker a hard time and he hooked us up with beers. Parker, hit us.
I thought I would be rewarded.
I am. You're first to bat. Come on now.
So I never really had a traditional career. I started actually in wildlife documentary filmmaking, and I would be chasing mountain lions up trees and crawling into bear dens to pull out cubs for wildlife surveys. We would film that actually and then upload to YouTube, so that's sort of where I started my infatuation with YouTube. I mean, I was in Utah, just a small town, and getting thousands of views on this, and so I ended up getting a job at YouTube eventually, and I think I was just trying to figure out all the tips and tricks to building a better YouTube channel. So I started diving into the data, and YouTube obviously has a shit ton of data. And I remember, like, I would pull, I'd write a query and I'd pull, like, number of subscribers, where subscribers also subscribe to, and it would be like, 2 billion rows. It would take 1 second to pull that, and I would think, wow, like, this is so much information. This is like the secret of the universe is just living inside this data warehouse. And for me, that's where I started where it clicked, and I was like, digital media, the defining difference between, I guess, traditional media is that it just comes down to data. We just have so much more data. I know that's sort of under threat now, somewhat with data protection, but still, what we get as a network, with so many channels, we're talking 7 billion channels, 7 billion views a month. Like, there's tremendous power to see what's trending, what people are interested in. So I think. That moment when I was pulling a query, that was a trigger for me.
And speaking as someone who gets mad YouTube numbers, that's your cue, Mari. What's going on?
Yeah, so I started ballet when I was 2.5 years old, and it was the only career that I had ever thought that I would have in my entire life. When I started YouTube in 2010, I was still a professional ballerina with the Oakland Ballet. It was my full-time job, 6 days a week, 8 hours a day. And I never thought that I would stray from that road. I started uploading to YouTube with Smosh, who had already existed for 5 years at that point, really just as another thing to do. I'm sure all of you guys in the audience have many things on your plate all the time, and adding just another thing on it is a normal thing. And that's how I saw it. I didn't think that it was going to be something that would shift my career in any way or be some sort of scapegoat for my career. But as soon as we started doing this, I realized that the numbers don't lie. At launch, Smosh Games was the YouTube channel that hit 1 million subscribers the quickest at that point. And so the numbers just kind of added up, and it was the first time in my life that I realized that I could step away from dancing and start a new career and a new chapter of my life.
Yeah, for any young women out there, she's got role model tattooed right here. So, but again, because you do, huge YouTube numbers, you get a lot of advertisers, there's probably a good chance Emily's going to throw some ads on that channel. How did you sort of get your start into this space? And again, I've heard the story. It's a good one, so don't apologize. I don't want to hear you say, I'm sorry. Just run with it.
Yeah, no, I always wanted to be a singer growing up. I'm still a beast on the karaoke. But in the end, when I was about to finish university, I actually chose media and media agency world, which is, if you ask anybody back in the day 20 years ago, that was certainly not the case. You just fell into it.
Technically, it's last century now. Yeah.
Oh, God. And I remember my first agency, I received a book. It was about this thick. And this book, if you read it all, you would know everything about media. And you could read it in a couple of days. And that was that. You knew how many poster sites there were and how many channels you could buy on TV. And I guess, obviously things have changed significantly. I still have the book. I do give it to people sometimes because the problem now in our industry is people who are coming in, who are very, very young, actually don't understand some of the basic stuff anymore because they're just born into the digital world. And we're still doing a lot of that other stuff. It's just that we're doing that and everything else. So in some ways, that's why I'm still where I am. I haven't had a eureka moment of sort of change, but every day is that eureka moment within, the media agency world. And so for me, it's just a massive challenge, and that's what keeps me here.
And for full disclosure, Roxy, both you and I are former ex-MTV employees, and this beautiful panel is hosted and sponsored by Viacom.
Shout out to Viacom
Yes.
fans.
But what sort of convinced you to jump the fence from the MTV sort of hallowed grounds to Empire? What was your path?
Right, actually I want to dial back just a little bit. So to give you a little background on myself, I was born and raised in Beijing, just a normal kid. And when I was 17, I moved to Amsterdam to study audio engineering, just as a normal kid to Amsterdam, And because at the time, I just wanted to learn how to produce, be a rock star, dress all in black, and travel the world. So basically, dreams do come true. Fast forward a little bit, I got a job in Viacom, especially associated to MTV brand as they're part of their talent and artist team in Europe, mostly focusing on music programming in Benelux region. And as some of you might know, electronic dance music is absolutely huge in that region. So I got to collect a lot of resources in that particular market. And the natural move from then at the time seems like to move into a renowned Dutch label. And that's basically what I did. I started working for a Dutch label called Mixmash, and I was there as their streaming manager and also as their Asian business developer as well. And until last year, basically, I got approached by Alex Branson and Ghazi, the CEO of Empire, and the rest is the history.
By the way, Ghazi's so cool, no one knows his last name. He just rocks just Ghazi.
Yeah.
So. Is he here? Okay. Now that we've done the sort of 2 steps back, let's kind of take a step forward. I'm going to start with Mari. You know, with obviously, I mean, you went from, is it ballerina? How do I say professional ballet person? Ballerina? Okay.
Yeah, ballerina.
What is male ballerinas? Ballerinos?
Ballerino.
Male dancer, still. Yeah, it's still male dancer.
So, but obviously when you started dabbling with video and with video games, like when was that sort of what the fuck moment that you said, this is for the win, I got to go on in this? What was that moment where you said, you know what, this is no longer a hobby, this is a job, this is real?
I think it was the moment where we started to have partnerships, and partnerships with companies that kids in the 90s grew up with. You know, it's
Last century, we were literally millennials. They don't know what 90s are.
That's right.
To them, it's like old cool music.
Right. It's a relic. But yeah, I think it was the moment where I realized that before the term influencer even came onto the scene, it was understanding that we were able to create entertainment that was valuable for companies because it translated to an audience, and they understood that that our fun was genuine, and that meant sales for them. And so I think it was when we got to work with the Microsofts and the Nintendos of the world, and the Sonys of the world, where we're like, oh my goodness, is this really happening? Are we actual ambassadors of companies that felt like the biggest things in the world? And yeah, it's been magical.
And Parker, you obviously run, we can't even use the word digital agency because in many ways they have just become the agencies. You work with a lot of these brands, you work with a lot of these influencers. Sort of in your role, your capacity, your company, how do you guys bridge the tastemakers with the people who want to be associated with basically people who've now become in their own ways brands? What's the secret sauce?
Well, so I guess MCNs for a long time have had a position, like a role called talent partnerships, right? And I'd say what's interesting now is how sophisticated brands are becoming with influencer marketing and understanding the tastemakers and who they are. And so they're, instead of asking for like a package of talent, they're like asking for specific individuals. And so we're having to actually move our partnerships team generally under the management team so that it's more of a direct relationship. Some of the other ways that we might find the right talent to match up with brands would be actually through the use of a lot of data science. We have data scientists on staff, so that's sort of an unusual role that we have in a company like ours, but trying to find affinity for brands that are already latent within our network. So, yeah.
And Emily, your company and your background is from a traditional ad agency that's sort of evolved into a digital agency. Obviously, you're using a lot of big data, but is there an X factor that you look at, that numbers, it's beyond the numbers? Is there something that you see that you have to tell the clients that this is the reason why you need to work with somebody like Mari?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a real mix of different things you've got to think about. I think you have to be very conscious of data, understanding what data is actually valuable and also what data is not fake, particularly in the influencer space. I also think it takes a certain type of mindset. I think that's the X factor. If both the brand and the influencer are both open-minded and are open to being authentic as a result, that is going to bring you the secret sauce. The problem that I tend to find with advertisers or brands is that often there's this expectation to completely try and control, and that isn't always helpful because it's not authentic to the people that the influencers speak to. And equally, there are also influencers who have to also be mindful of how many brands they associate with, how often they do that, because then consumers again will say, well, yesterday they were carrying this brand, and the next day it's another one. So I'd say, mindset, a collaborative mindset, and being completely open-minded would be the X factor.
And Roxy, to kind of follow up on this sort of train of thought, among the artists that either you've worked with, but more importantly, Empire's worked with, in many ways, bands have to be the brands, and they can't always rely on their label or their management to do all the heavy lifting. For an indie label, an indie music company like Empire, what do you guys do to sort of help these independent artists not only become relevant, but become huge in the social media space? What is it that you guys provide that essentially a major label, for whatever reason, can't?
Right.
Like, what is the reason we need to sign with you?
I feel like, excuse me, I feel like there are a lot of factors that we have applied to our brand and to especially the artists that we work with to kind of help them to engage better. But essentially, if I really have to pinpoint that one thing that makes it a little bit different, I might have to say it's the culture, it's the company culture, and it's the people that Ghazi basically that hired to build this company. It's different. Like, we actually live in the middle of the culture. The people Ghazi hired, they're fans of the music. They're fans of the artists that we work with as well. Basically, it's really easy for us to come up with, let's say, programming campaigns for our artists because we're literally targeting people like us. So we know all the right lingual, like we know the targets, and we know, the way to engage with these people because we are these people. So I feel like this is one of the things really set us apart.
Is there a particular artist recently where Empire pinpointed this person has this thing? We're going to work it, we're going to work it, we're going to own it. Is there one unique, like for an example, let's talk about Lil Nas X.
Yeah.
This is an artist who just hit all these boxes no one ever thought would ever be in the same box. Indie, urban, country, gay, and is the hottest thing right now.
Yeah.
And obviously, a lot of people saw that this guy's potent combination was explosive.
Yeah.
With the types of artists that you've worked with,
Yeah.
and especially in the digital space, is there something that comes to mind recently or immediately that we're like, ooh, this he or she, they got it? What is there that it in information technology that you had to run with?
Right.
Just one big name drop.
One big
Bring
name
it.
drop. Oh, we have so many though. Okay, so maybe I will name XXX Tentacion. I know this is a very polarizing brand, but I just want to point it out there. For us, about him is so important to kind of emphasize the influence with his music he had on his fans. So, for instance, for his latest project, we just really want to bring fans first, ask fans to kind of engage with the music. So what we did is we created this murals, 12 murals all around the globe, and then we started this online campaign, and we asked our, the fans from XXX Tentacion to kind of create content with that murals and submit it, and the winner ultimately get to create the next music video, which happened to call Sauce. So, that really got fans to really engage and then get them to understand, the most important thing by the end of the day is really just the music,
So you figured out a way to convince fans to make his next music video.
Yeah.
Well done. Bravo. And I always thought it was extension. Now it's XXX extension?
Yeah.
Oh, I stand corrected.
Well, again, I'm Chinese, so I don't know how good my pronunciation is.
Oh, no, that actually sounds a lot cooler, so we'll just
Thank
leave it
you.
at that.
Latin flair.
Yes. Parker, now in your line of work, you guys obviously have to look at a huge digital toolbox of new platforms, fading technologies, emerging technologies. Is there something that's come up on your radar in the past 6 months that you think we need to pay attention for the next 6 years?
Yeah, so a couple things come to mind. One, I think the idea of gaming as a place where you see Fortnite become more of a social network than just a gaming platform. So there's a Marshmello concert. It's like 11 million, live viewers. I mean, there's a lot of people watching this stuff and participating. It's become more mainstream. Juju Smith, obviously a big gamer and football player. So I think culturally, gaming gets, there's a lot of emphasis on gaming, but for us, like, how do we then work within that world? I would say, again, a lot of talk about virtual influencers, but the cost has really come down quite a bit on developing some of these virtual influencers. We're talking like $3 to $50K. So
when you mean virtual influencers, could you be a bit more specific?
Sure. So, I mean, in the U.S., there's Lil Miquela, which is a pretty big influencer by Brooder, and then there's in Japan you have Hatsune Miku, which is like a musician who performs from front of live audiences, is pretty big. Lil Dicky just did.
So these are like AR, VR, hologram type influencers.
Yeah. So they're completely virtually created, right? And in the case of Hatsune Miku, they use like a software called Vocaloid, so they're actually producing all of the audio track synthetically. And so the team behind that they're just engineers, right? They're creating this, and I think that's very appealing to us as a talent on the talent side because we love our talent. But having ownership of IP is really interesting because these characters are obviously IP that you'd create. And you can duplicate them. You can do amazing brand deals, right? You see this with Lil Miquela. She's wearing a different apparel in every Instagram post. So it's very scalable. It's very interesting to us. We're just not sure if... So it seems to be very popular in Asia. In the US, there's some big Instagram stars, like I mentioned, Lil Miquela and a few others. But we're still not sure if it's like the right time, right? But we're starting to invest in this.
So Mari, because you obviously are in the gaming space, did you check out the Marshmello show on Fortnite? And if you didn't, that's fine. But B, more importantly, is when you obviously see the emergence of esports basically becoming a mainstream sport, what do you feel are sort of the social media platforms that are pushing it to the next level? Or, as Parker mentioned, do you think the games themselves need to be treated as social media platforms in their own right?
Yeah, well, that's lots of questions there.
I just become that guy I made fun of earlier, where I don't have the question, I only ramble.
No, it's okay. I think gaming and esports is definitely something that it's one of the hottest buzzwords right now. I think companies are feeling pressured to get involved, and I do think that the time is now if you're not already involved. It's moving fast. I feel like it's been a sort of an industry that's had like an underbelly of things churning for a long time, but with the stigma that gaming has had, it really didn't have a chance to really rise to the top yet. But right now you're seeing gaming becoming really top of mind and a household sort of thing that is talked about. From Fortnite being just so widely expansive with families, I think parents are now forced to figure out what Fortnite is and do some background research to see if their kids are allowed to play it and do deep dives on it. Ninja is a really great example, which I think, Parker, you mentioned is in your network. He's become a household name, transcending magazine covers, Adidas campaigns, things like that. So I think influencers in general will start to become household names. Lily Singh is another YouTuber who is now on NBC and has her own late night show. And so I think you'll be able to see that there's going to be a transcendence of these influencers who are once seen as just YouTubers, streamers, etc. And it's really because there's been enough time to figure out who is a reliable influencer who can actually get into a different industry and still knock it out of the park. As far as platforms go, I think it's going to be ever changing. Platforms that will continue enabling content creators to create communities will always be number one. And whether they're complete digital influencers or real life people, I think anything that connects will always be number one as far as the platform goes.
And Emily, in your super cool standing desk job, because those of us these days with bad backs or working digital don't sit at desks anymore.
I have a standing desk.
You do. Good, good, good. You've got a good doctor. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, like, obviously when a client comes in and they say, hey, we have this budget of X, Y, and Z, I think it's pretty safe to say that the days of just doing pure ad buys are over. If anything, people want to move towards branded entertainment, to getting behind a brand ambassador. Those of us who are into big data feel that sometimes there's a formula on calculating the market value of a particular influencer, or that particular influencer has a very good manager or a very good agency who basically knows how to twist your arm and say uncle or aunt and cough up the goods. But in your line of work, how do you determine the market value of a digital influencer and then spread that message / pain pill to your client? This is how much it's going to cost you.
Yeah, good. It's a great question. I mean, globally.
Feel free to take a very hard drink on that one, because that's not an easy answer.
Yeah. So in China, they've had a system that's been going on for a very long time. So, the influencer model and the monetization of influencers is extremely advanced. But in the rest of the world, we're still kind of overall still catching up with that.
In terms of platforms that you want to just do shout outs to, that people may be curious, because some of these platforms may not be prevalent in the West, are there any particular Chinese platforms that you guys are benchmarking?
I mean, the usual platforms. I mean, it's the WeChats, the Weibos, all of those. To be honest with you, the China market has
You've been lying to me the whole time?
particular specific agencies that just do this job. Within our agency, within Wavemaker, we actually have a platform called Inca, which basically allows us to monetize and look across multiple influencers from the nano all the way to the celebrity, cost them up, trade, etc. So there are algorithms, and there are also deals that are made. So I think it's a combination of the two that you mentioned earlier. And they will only get more and more sophisticated because the market's just getting bigger and bigger and more complex.
For one of your clients, and feel free to name them, have you guys gone to bat for an influencer which felt expensive at first but turned out to be the bargain of the century in terms of impact?
Personally, I haven't, but we have as an agency, absolutely. And it's, to be honest, it's almost all the time, because it's always hard to convince clients to spend a little more than they thought they should, or than they thought they would. And so, more often than not, with the right data in place, with the right strategy and thinking, it's often a success, a surprising success.
Parker, to sort of roll with this kind of sort of sentiment, obviously she's been very well trained by her company. What I'd like to hear is names. Are there any influencers that you guys work with that you feel like they get it, they got it, this is exactly the type of influencer you want everybody else to copy and follow? Is there that one person for, it could be the flavor of the week, flavor of the month influencer right now, who would it be?
Can I pick multiple? I can't.
For
There's
two.
different reasons, right?
Okay.
So let me give you different categories.
All right,
right?
we'll cut you off at 3.
Okay,
How about that?
3 is fine.
Okay.
All right, so
Pretty
3
one.
strikes
I'm
and
going
then
to do
you're
a
out.
traditional celebrity. I'm going to do just a huge YouTuber, and then a YouTuber that's transcending into Facebook. So one, on the traditional side, this is a newer area for us, which is to start building essentially the social video presence for these traditional celebrities. This is something that has been talked about for a while, even as far as the YouTube channel initiative, where they're funding channels. But the problem has been typically traditional celebrities don't really understand the YouTube format, and they don't really engage in the platform in a way that's useful for building an organic audience. So but now that's changing. So one of our best success stories now, we've just launched this about 6 months ago, but Noah Schnapp, who's from Stranger Things, in about 2 months, his channel, we launched it, filmed a bunch of content, and it's now 2 million subs. So we find that to be really successful. He's very engaging in the platform. He's a wonderful boy. Just big YouTuber. Cocomelon is probably the biggest YouTuber in the world. He does 2.5 billion views a month, which is, I mean, it's a kids channel. They usually get a lot more viewership, but it's just outstanding. He knows that, you know, YouTube isn't always, YouTube revenue isn't always going to last, especially for the kids genre. So they're developing a studio and starting to essentially develop new revenue lines around merchandise and toys. The third one that I'll say is one of our creators who's been labeled the James Bond of the sea. He basically dives into rivers and finds all sorts of interesting things, from guns to wedding rings to human remains that people have thrown into these rivers. And D Almighty is the name of the channel.
Don't tease us. What's his name? I want to know.
D Almighty. So he's got about 8 million on YouTube. He was doing really well, and he didn't really have time for any other social video platforms. But we said, look, we think we can build your social presence on these other platforms, specifically Facebook. So we started to help him syndicate his content onto Facebook and develop a Facebook page. Now he has about 1.5 million on Facebook and making just as much money, if not more, on Facebook.
And Roxy, obviously, you guys work with a wide range of artists from all around the world. If an artist or a manager comes into your office or meets you at a club and they basically say, there's too many social media platforms, give me the 1, 2, 3 ranking list of where I need to focus, but in your case, where you would basically create that cascading waterfall of viral marketing.
Right.
If you had to sort of choose the number 1, 2, or 3 social media platforms that you would push artists through,
Yeah.
what would it be?
I think it's really difficult to pinpoint 1, 2, or 3 even platforms. It really depends on the artist, though, the type of artist, right? So I want to name an example. For instance, Snoop Dogg, he's one of our artists we recently worked with as well. So, he's a funny guy.
Which artist is this again?
Snoop Dogg.
Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope everybody know who he is,
he an
what he
upcoming
likes. So for instance, Snoop Dogg, he's a funny guy, and he's being known as a funny guy, right? So a lot of his energy is coming from all the memes, all the GIF, right? He's probably the person that get memed about the most in the world. So for him, probably the most important platform will be like Giphy, the platform that people use to create stickers and create memes and stuff. So I feel like it really depends on different artists and where their energy point is. So we can give, a good advice on that.
Okay, so assuming the artist is obviously not as funny and talented as, say, the Dogfather,
Right.
what would you tell them?
I would say probably those platforms you're able to kind of present yourself really well through visuals and not just necessarily through audio. The standard, I would say probably Instagram. You can't avoid that, obviously. Facebook they definitely have the best algorithm when it comes to targeting the right audience. And basically just any platforms that helps you to kind of engage, really well with your audience, basically.
So, Mara, you've obviously made your mark in the YouTube space, but obviously you can't just be exclusive to YouTube. If you had to pick 1, 2, 3 sort of, if you had to rank them, or if you don't want to pick favorites, just say the 3 sort of spillover social media platforms that you feel amplify you as a brand and, more importantly, the Smosh game culture, what would you sort of throw out there as sort of being the top 3 amplifying social media, digital media platforms?
Yeah, YouTube is our home, but right now it's Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And all of those have such different flavors, and I think that's something that's really important to remember, that each one has audience spillover, but each one kind of has a very different way of expressing the content that you already make.
Okay. And so, because we're running down and running out of time, I'm going to shut down and close down with for all of you working in the digital / social media / new media space, obviously you guys have tried a lot of platforms. What was one that you got behind, emotionally invested, and realized, oh, this is just going sideways? And then more importantly, is there a platform that you're currently using now that you think will continue to be relevant 3 years from now? So pick the one that failed miserably 3 years ago, and you can't believe you still have a profile on that site. And two, which current social media platform, whether it's you, but more importantly, clients, you feel will continue to have strength and relevance and momentum 3 years from now? Pre-IPO, post-IPO, doesn't matter.
Man, I can't remember the name of the app.
You've
but-
already blocked it out?
Well, it had so much hype. I want to say it was last year or maybe 2 years ago. It was like everybody needs to get on this. It was it would have been an Instagram killer. So something similar to that, very video and photo driven with very short captions. My network of friends and I, we all signed up for it, and within a couple of months, it just disappeared. And so we I don't know, maybe it just took all of our information, and that was the. Oh, my
ASAP.
husband's room. Is it something with a V? Yeah, I can't remember. Vero, that's right. Never know what I don't know what happened with Vero.
What was unique about Vero?
Sorry.
What was the app?
It was a video and photo sharing site, and everyone was hype on it, and it just kind of disappeared. I made a few Veros, but I just don't know what happened with it. I do think that TikTok will remain as a driver of just memes, and I don't know if we'll see another Lil Nas X, but I know that TikTok was a huge reason why people started to really meme him and get his music going. And so I think we'll see other phenomenons like that happen. But I think that the audience right now is really fervent on discovering things that are interesting and new.
And Roxy, your bad bet and your big bet.
Right, so actually I just want to follow her train of thought on TikTok. I'm not sure if TikTok will be, that platform will still be around in 3 years or 5 years, but I would say similar app or similar platform like TikTok will definitely be around. It creates the opportunity to kind of, make sure your audience could create their own content to engage with the content creator. I think things like that will definitely still be around in 3 years.
And Parker?
Yeah, first I'll talk about the app that I thought would do well and failed, and then I'll talk about where I think it's going. So I really liked HQ Trivia, and so did a lot of other people. It got to the point where it was doing like 2 million concurrent views. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but HQ Trivia was an app that was essentially a game show, and so anyone could participate and anyone could win money, and it was live broadcast twice a day. And literally my whole office would stop what they're doing and start playing this app. And to me, that was like the future of real interactive TV. Like, I think Bandersnatch is cool, but it's not really anything new. I mean, we've had...
Don't go there.
I mean, come on. It's just Choose Your Own Adventure. I've been reading those since I was a kid with Goosebumps and whatnot. But anyway, so I think HQ ultimately failed. It's still going on, but I think the main talent left, and there was a dispute there, but whatever. I do think that is ultimately going to be the future of interactive media, something like that. I think there's much more that could be done in exploring that, but ultimately HQ, I think, failed. I'm going to call it right now. Where this is all going, sorry, do you have a question? Where this is all going, this may be naive of me, but I think that where we're at right now is kind of going to be the state of social media for a while, at least for the midterm. I think given a lot of the new privacy legislation, I think that's making it very difficult for new startup social video platforms or social media platforms to even pop up. I think it reinforces the incumbent's position, but it makes it very difficult for new startups. What you're seeing with LDPR in Brazil, GDPR in Europe, the new California privacy legislation, you're seeing essentially a balkanization that's starting to happen, I think, on the internet, where Uzbekistan, Russia is talking about having a more walled-off, separate internet, and I think that will start to lead to actually maybe a similar China model where you have independent social networks that start to form a little bit more in these countries. So I think in the short term, it's going to be very difficult to launch a new social media network. But I think in the long term, if this balkanization continues to happen, I think you're going to see more social media networks pop up in each of these countries if they start to isolate themselves, right? Because they would just satisfy a natural niche like has happened in China, obviously.
And Emily.
Oh, I have so many thoughts. Am I too old if I say Friendster?
Oh, you just,
Is that older than MySpace?
wow. Wow, you went there.
It lasted a little while. No, I mean, talking more about the future because I think that's, probably the most interesting for me at the moment. And I've been thinking a lot about this question in the last 24 hours. And it is.
I asked you last week, though.
Indeed, but I thought about it since yesterday. I mean, we're living in a world right now where there's a lot of tension, a lot more isolation. Countries are kind of closing in on themselves. And I kind of feel that there's going to be a lot more in the sort of messaging space, with encrypted messaging spaces, how those will develop, how people will want to use them, and then therefore, obviously, how maybe influencers may become more involved or brands may be looking into that space. Because, next year I think will only be more disruption, both in terms of our world, but also the world out there. So I think for me, that's going to be the interesting part, how that's going to develop a little bit more. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Before we wind things down, we're going to open the floor to 3 questions. So if anyone's got a question, and please address who you want the question to go to, raise your hand and we'll get somebody put a mic your way. Any questions? Wow, everybody really wants to get going. Hold on, we have one question.
It is the last
one?
panel of the last
Yes,
day.
and everyone stuck through. Thank you.
I think my question is like quite general, but probably more to Mari, because like social media, especially now TikTok is so popular, right? And TikTok has 2 versions, one in China and one for like the general international public other than China. So, and China's such a growing like audience. How are you gonna reach out to them? And is this possibly a problem in the future where your audiences are actually quite split when such a big potential audience group are not actually getting your videos?
That's a great question. Mari?
Yeah, Smosh has not had a huge development within Asia, and we're hoping to fix that. A lot of our branding has to do with comedy, which is pretty centric with English speaking and a lot of American type of humor. Although we have a huge audience in Australia and the UK, a lot of the humor is still kind of compacted with what we know within our world. I think with gaming, that is one way that we're able to transcend that and sort of marry our audiences overseas as well. And so I think that, finding the ways to kind of take our comedy and broaden it is going to be really important for us.
And then speaking of TikTok, the run is going low here. The times are going down. Do we have another question on the floor? Yes, no, maybe? One more? Oh, go ahead, sure.
Emily, so you mentioned encrypted messages and localized groups. Do you mean the countries that limit certain apps in certain countries like QQI?
Yes, a mixture. So I mean, in some countries where there is disruption, and I can tell you about obviously Hong Kong, now a lot of users are using Telegram instead of WhatsApp. And in similar sort of other zones of that are happening around the world, similar trends have happened as well. Yes, it is also related to situations where there are bans on certain media as well. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. We've just wrapped it up, and thank you for Music Matters, All That Matters, all our sponsors. Well done. Everybody give yourselves a round of applause.